It's a curious question what Vesalius looked like, because when he became famous and an authority on anatomy, people made portraits as they normally did in the 16th century. They made people look better than they were. They regularized their stature and their features. But the only authorized picture of Vesalius is the one that appears in the publications which he brought out. And it's always the same portrait. He is doing the dissection of the muscles of the hand, which were very important to the idea of the difference between man and the lower animals. And he represents himself very clearly with a wart, which I first thought was a fault in the picture, and I took it out, because who would have a picture of himself with a big black wart over his eye? But then I looked at all of the copies I could find of Vesalius, and it was very clear that that wart was intentional. And so are other features of his anatomy. He has placed himself against the table, where the table comes at a waist height. And I thought, well, tables don't come at your waist, they come lower down your leg. But he did numerous things to emphasize his particular anatomy, which was not typical. And so we know what Vesalius looked like because he wanted his official portrait to look like him and not some ideal figure. Yes, dwarf is a word that has been applied to Vesalius. It's not a very good clinical expression. I think if you wanted to say what he was clinically, you would say he was achondroplastic or hypochondroplastic, which meant that the long bones did not grow as they should. And so he looked like a person of very short stature. Another feature of achondroplasia is that the spine grows forward, so that there is a clear projection of the abdomen. His forehead is very prominent. His hands are conspicuously different from the hands of the specimen that he is dissecting. So he has made numerous attempts to highlight the difference between his personal anatomy and the aspect of a normal human being. The personality of Vesalius has no immediate descriptors, but people who read what he wrote tend to see him as a person with a sharp temper and a strong will, somewhat manipulative of others, and intolerant of any behavior that did not support his work. So he was a sharp-tempered person by most people's perception. I agree with that. He was not only a young man in a hurry, but a young man whose haste to achieve the ultimate in science was assisted by a sharp temper. Whether Vesalius was religious or not is another one of those biographical questions that we can't answer with any certainty. He was working for a patron who was very religious, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. But he personally, whenever he talks about a religious idea or religious belief, he degrades it to some extent. He makes it into a joke. He sets it aside. So the best likelihood is that he was a thoroughly secular person who had no truck with religion. Vesalius gained some position from being on the medical staff of Charles V. It's not certain that he was the primary physician. He was a member of the medical staff. And Charles V himself was not particularly obedient to his physicians when they prescribed a better diet or abstention from certain things that were clearly bad for him. So as a physician, as a member of Charles V's medical staff, he was no more obeyed than any of the other physicians on the staff. He was not the protomedicus. He was a member of the staff. And although the position gave him a certain authority, it's not very clear that it saved him from criticism.